Good afternoon. It's Tuesday, February 23rd. I'm back in the reading nook. It is a slightly chilly, cloudy and blustery day. I have more parcels to delve into, including this big box. I've not got to the bottom of it yet, and if you've watched previous unboxings in the Nook, you will know the general subject of what is in here. So if I start pulling out things, we'll get to something I haven't looked at yet. So far, Gateway Bestiary, Troll Pack, and previously Griffin Mountain. So what I'm looking at in this box is the reprints from Chaosium for titles that were published for RuneQuest II, now known as RuneQuest Classic. And the next item out of the box is Pavis, or Pavis, depending upon the pronunciation you prefer. So this is a print-on-demand version of the box set that was originally published in '82, I believe. Let's just check. Let's have a look. 1983, actually. 1983. Essentially, we have Pavis, Threshold to Danger, Exploits along the River of Cradles. Pavis is the first city intended exclusively for RuneQuest players. Its neighbourhood maps are indexed for the services adventurers need, armourers, temples, and so on. Gimpy is an excellent inn. Gimpy is legendary in RuneQuest terms. It's fully described, as are city, political, religious groupings, and prominent personalities. Of the three scenarios, Welcome to the City situates the characters and introduces lunar officialdom. This multi-session scenario is matched by The Cradle, another multi-session adventure about the first giant cradle to appear in 700 years. Characters battle mass magic to try and stop or help the cradle on its way. A glorious struggle which will be sung for about 100 years. Burglary at Rouse House is a more compact adventure offering 1 or 2 evenings of play. Encounters, full stats, and dozens of scenario hooks help game masters create more episodes. Background includes chronology, historical essays, maps, and the cults of Flintnail, Landbrill, Zolafel, and Pavis. There is an elaborate plan and description of the the Downriver Sundome Temple complex as well. It says the RuneQuest campaign mate to the Big Rebel scenarios. I do have a copy of Big Rebel in the box, and I will get to that in another unboxing. Now, of course, one of the things about this is that it doesn't come with the maps. They are available for separate to buy, but essentially what you've got here is a complete campaign setting for RuneQuest Classic. And what's interesting, I think, to remember is in the early days of RuneQuest, you kind of had to divide between the focus of what was being explored in terms of Glorantha. So in the early days, it was Pavis, which is primarily the major city in Prax. And also, obviously, you had cults of Prax as sort of like the general source material on the cults of the region. And most of those cults were found elsewhere as well. But that focus on the area was particular to the period, as opposed to the period that's focused upon of Dragon Pass today, which is back closer to Dragon Pass, Sartar, and the relationships between Sartar and the Lunar Empire. Whereas here, what you've got is a city under occupation for much of the time. The city has been occupied by the Lunar Empire. And if you've read any of the tales of Griselda and her cohorts, you will be able to you'll get an idea of what the city is like through a sort of a noir sensibility. Basically, Oliver Dickinson essentially writing Damon Runyon pastiches set in the city. So, but what we've got in here anyway, this is a city I've always wanted to visit. Gaming-wise, I've never have, but I can certainly remember players groups playing in it and exploring it. So inside what we've got here, and this is by Steve Perrin and Greg Stafford, and opens up with the common knowledge for players, and this is essentially what everyone knows about Pavis. Basically, essentially what we've got here is a map of where it's located, and then a map of the city itself. History, chronology, how it was built, and then you've got a more famous view of Pavis. People will recognise. So you've got essentially you've got two cities here. You've got New Pavis and you've got sort of Old Pavis, and Old Pavis is the rubble. Great disaster struck it, and the site was abandoned, and it now kind of works as, okay, you have a base of operations in Pavis as the city, and then Big Rubble is the adventuring site, or the primary adventuring site. It's for trolls and chaos and other dangers. And again, if you've read any of the Griselda tales, some of those do take place out in the Big Rubble or refer to it. Here we go. Basically, you've got the founding of New Pavis through here. Then we go on to prices, powerful people. So quite a lot of information here that is going to be available to the players. Again, we get to the first of the really good artwork that can be found throughout this book. And these books are really nicely illustrated. These days people want full colour, but but black and white can be just as good, and there's some great artists. And here we have the staff at Gimpy's, famously called Gimpy's because the owners all have a leg missing. Again, here's the map of Gimpy's. And this style of artwork, this style of floor plans is recognisable because, let's have a look, see who it's by, doesn't say offhand, but it features a lot of Call of Cthulhu supplements as well, right through from things like Haunting, right through up into the early 90s. And it has a certain rough style, but really works for it. It's not bad cartography by any means. Here we go. We've got a discussion of cults. So the first cult we have here, cults of Pavis, Flintnail, essentially, which is a Mustali cult. From what I'm just glancing at it, it's not a cult I'm familiar with. Landbrill. Again, it's basically the cult of the criminal underworld. It's going to basically Flintnail is the cult of builders and maintainers. Basically tied up the cult of Pavis, and where are we going to? Pavis is a city cult. We're going to Zolafel, and Zolafel is a river cult, and I presume that's going to be tied into, for example, the River of Cradles scenario, which comes in here later. So that's covering three cults, and then we go on to 4 cults, rebel forms, using rebel forms. What's interesting is that you can't just go off and explore the rebel. You have to get permission, and you need forms. The Lunar Empire basically imposing sort of like a system of essentially passes and forms for you to actually actively go on adventure. And it's a thing you see occasionally in other things, in other scenarios as well. then we basically got the city guide for the game master. We have a wider map there. So the maps are included, but obviously not the wide paper maps, essentially poster-style maps that the box set would contain. And then we come to basically describes the city of settlement of Corfu, which I've only ever come across essentially as being as somewhere that is near the site of the Sea Cave adventure, which is one of the early adventures which was never published, but was released with the support pack for RuneQuest Classic 2-3 years ago, and it's a really nice little adventure of the player characters have to explore a cave because something in there has been attacking local fishermen. So the Game Master section, essentially, doesn't replicate the content as such in the player's guide, but it explores it in more detail. Again, just basic rather than just simple exploration of the city, we have a discussion of the neighbourhoods with a map there showing you how their relations to each other. And essentially what you've down here at the bottom is the wall, and beyond that is the rebel. So essentially, if you have a remember with the image I showed you of the city, this is actually looking, essentially, this is around the other way. Okay, this wall is in the background with the rebel beyond in that image. Okay, and then closer, tighter maps, more detailed. Here we go, like that. And this is something that's been replicated more recently in something like the Dregs of Clearwine supplement on the Johnstown Compendium, which I have reviewed, and is a very nice little slum neighbourhood kind of area to explore in a much smaller city. Then we come on to look at the different neighbourhoods, essentially showing each of the various buildings, and again this is accompanied by like just sort of simple, basically a map there of the neighbourhood. Then you've got a nice, just simple piece of artwork just at the top there, which gives you an idea of what the streets are like. They're not wide open, they're cluttered, they're untidy, people live there, and that's nicely done. So, you've got a guide to living in Pavis, various thieves of Pavis, temples, places, armourers buying and selling escort services. Yeah, it does cover that as well, if you're looking for it. I mean, most role-playing games probably don't go near there. Tables of Rumours. Again, quite extensive. A bribery table at the back, and we come on to the third part, is episodes for the Game Master. So we come into introduction, essentially scenario hooks with different ideas for scenarios, so that you which might be checking out suspects, mistaken identity, dealing with squatters, and just a list of ideas at which the GM can take and basically expand into a full adventure. Welcome to the City basically deals with how to get there, and this is designed really for an adventuring party coming to Pavis for the first time. So that's basically a major adventure. When we go on to the Cradle, Cradle's a 4-part adventure concerned with the appearance of a giant baby cradle floating down the Zolofel as of old. This has not occurred in over 7 centuries, has taken everyone quite by surprise. Characters will be asked to defend the cradle and the many magical treasures it contains from the voracious lunar plundering. Although the player characters could plunder as well, doing so is not easy, and by following the lead of the scenario, they will get the most out of the material presented. So it's going to be basically a big classic scenario, really memorable, something that many players will have done in the past, and potentially could do now again with the publication of this book. See like the map of the cradle, the interior. There we go. And actually, with the giant baby there. Lots of stats because you're going to need them. And then you have at last a handouts and so on. And then for the players, there's a big map of the big rebel there at the back. So I will look at the big rebel when I get to it in the box. But Pavis Threshold to Danger, I say classic city setting for RuneQuest. It's primarily the only one. There is a guide to glamour, and they're expanding upon that with various subsequents. But again, this is the classic. And if you don't have this is obviously a nice opportunity to get this and have it in print on your shelf, and perhaps explore Pavis a little bit earlier than the classic period, in the classic period, rather than the run up to the Hero Wars, which is going on now. Nicely done. You will need to pick up the posters, maps available separately if you want those. You can run the content in that without. But in the meantime, I hope you've enjoyed this unboxing in the Nook. I'll be back with more soon. If you liked it, please click the button down below. If you have any feedback or comments, then I do take the time to look at them. And lastly, if you've enjoyed this and want to see more, please subscribe. I will be coming back out to the garden and sitting here and chatting about books I've got in boxes. So, bye for now, and I hope I see you again for another unboxing in the Nook.